age, or even college age usually. These are people who are actively farming or trying to farm or want to farm, trying to find land access, trying to find somewhere to apprentice. If you want to move on to the next slide. I'll just scroll through a few of these things. One of the things that the National Young Farmers Coalition does, and I'm going to look at my notes here to get the numbers, they do a survey of young farmers similar to the ag census, but specific to young farmers every few years. So this data was collected, that survey, their most recent survey ended in 2017. So this data is just about exactly 2 years old. It wrapped in February 2017, and they surveyed 3,517 past, current, and aspiring farmers who were all under the age of 40. So to coalesce this data around what a young farmer looks like in America, they did cap that number for these, for those reasons. But it's just interesting when you look at who's farming in America now and who's coming up as a farmer. The majority of young farmers did not, and this is on a national level, it's probably a little bit different in Oklahoma, but the majority of people did not grow up on a farm. They got interested in college or through some other means. They wanted a career that would work with their hands. Next slide, please. They're also really educated, which comes into play on that student loan issue I mentioned earlier. And as any of you know who are working on farming, it takes a wide range of skills, and you know, there's not really much that you don't have to know. Next slide, please. Women are also predominantly among the group of people who are farming increasingly these days, or at least the ones that responded to the survey certainly. But from my work just anecdotally across the country, I know that there are a lot of women who are farming and ranching and leading farms, and I think that these numbers hold out even in Oklahoma in terms of principal farm operators. To some degree, a lot of women are farming. A lot of young growers are also interested in more sustainable and organic practices. So when asked to describe how they're growing, these were a lot of the things that young farmers said. And I think this reflects not only the values of people in that age group, but also sometimes what was accessible to them in terms of not being able to afford certain equipment or certain volumes of land that might make other time frames of growing make sense, especially as we saw a couple slides ago. A lot of these people are first generation farmers. They're not inheriting 500 or 1,000 acres. They're starting with a small plot of land and trying to figure out how they can make it most marketable. So if they can go to their customers directly, and there's a slide I think about marketing too, but if they can go to their customers directly and build themselves as organic and sustainable, you know, that's great. But I think it's also a values issue as well. What are they growing? Lots of vegetables, and I think again this is partly because of what I just mentioned. It's a lot more economical to start a small vegetable crop than to invest in a herd of animals or the infrastructure to do something on a larger scale. Certainly the infrastructure needed for certain commodity crops would be a lot more substantial. Not that it doesn't take infrastructure to grow anything, but also I think that's just, again, a values statement around people want to grow the things that they're eating. They want to have a direct relationship. These are all things that you hear on a national level, and I bet if we talk to people in this room about why they're growing what they grow. But it really also, there's a lot of growers across the spectrum. The National Young Farmers Coalition is also trying to do a better job of reaching farmers who are growing more conventionally. People that seek out this organization, like all organizations, are really looking for support where they haven't found it elsewhere. So that does skew results a little bit. If you are a large commodity grower who's fourth generation and somewhere like Oklahoma growing wheat, you might not have reason to seek out resources from an organization like the National Young Farmers Coalition, because you've grown up being well associated with your community, your family. You know who to turn to for crop insurance. You're not having issue with those student loans because it's, you know, it's something that, you know, is just all ingrained in the way your family's been farming for years. Here are the issues that young farmers say they're having. Land access, number one. Of course, this is going to be a lot more significant in places like California or the Hudson Valley of New York, where land is extremely expensive, but this is also something I hear talking to younger growers here. Student loan debt, which I mentioned, and then a lot of things that are going to also apply to all growers, especially small growers. You know, labor, affordable housing for that labor and for themselves. But some of these issues are particularly important for younger growers. If you're a young person who maybe doesn't have a spouse yet who works off the farm, you might not have access to employer-sponsored health insurance of any kind. you're going to have a harder time with land access, probably in the same way that anyone who's 25 is going to have a harder time buying a house than someone who's 45, because they just don't have that credit history. It's probably going to be their first property purchase. All of these things are compounded when you're trying to start a business instead of just a personal endeavor. So these are a lot of the reasons that the National Young Farmers Coalition and their chapters across the country are specifically trying to speak to those issues and everything that they do. And that's going to be backed up by these resources that I want to share with you today also. So one of the top resources that's available to young farmers across the country and that we're trying to increasingly make available here in Oklahoma are chapters, local chapters. So this is a gathering of chapter leaders from across the country. This photo was taken, I think I took this photo, so this was probably taken about 3 years ago. This is a little outdated. Our Oklahoma chapter did send people to this national gathering for the first time this year. We were really excited to be able to do that. So these folks represent probably, 30 to 40 chapters were able to come to this from across the country. So chapters are a really powerful tool for young farmers, not only because farming can be isolating, but also because together young farmers have found that they're able to really pursue legislative goals with their, to advocate better for their needs within the state and on a national basis. They're also, chapters across the country have done fantastic things. I think I've got a slide kind of listing some of the things. Yeah, sure. So community, mixers, just happy hours, finding other people to talk to, and it's not just about chit chat. A lot of times you'll get into conversations just like a lot of you are probably having in the breaks between sessions here about what's working for you and what's not, what seed companies are better for what you're growing and which ones aren't. But it's also great about, just peer-to-peer learning and other business networks of those kinds. A lot of young farmer chapters have done things like plan rotating work days on each other's farms, kind of like old-fashioned barn raisings, but maybe for something a little simpler, like getting your transplants in the ground, or actually some have done literal barn raisings or maybe hoop house raisings, as the case might be these days. And they've also done things like create tool libraries, lending libraries for libraries, a loose term, but let's say you don't need this particular hand implement or harvesting tool all the time. Most of us just need those things a few weeks a year. You don't need this post hole digger, etc. If there was a pool of these things that could be shared collaboratively, that would be beneficial to a lot of small growers. So some chapters have worked on those things. Policy change, though, was a big piece of it for a lot of chapters. And on the state level, chapters have had a lot of success. There's a chapter in the Northwest, for example, that advocated for funding and advocacy around farmer mental health issues. Unfortunately, there's a lot of suicide among certain demographics of farmers in particular, and they felt that in their own chapter personally. And so they advocated and successfully got a bill passed to better fund healthcare and mental health care for farmers in their state. On a more slightly upbeat note, some farmers in Minnesota advocated to make transition between older and more experienced farmers and younger farmers easier through tax incentives. So an experienced farmer is no longer going to use their land. They receive tax incentives for selling or leasing to a newer and younger farmer. And that's a fantastic bill that really makes that land transition process better for all parties involved. And that was an entirely Young Farmer chapter-led initiative. On the national level too, the National Farmers Coalition, and I'll mention this too, but their chapters did a lot of advocacy around the Farm Bill and had a lot of success. A lot of young farmer friendly provisions were included in the recent Farm Bill. So other resources, I just want to highlight these. These are, most of the resources I'm going to highlight are either based online, things that are easier to access as PDFs or as interactive tools online, or they're multi-page documents. I would have loved to come and have a bunch of things to hand out, but this document alone I think is, I don't know, maybe 30 plus pages, fully illustrated. It's beautiful. I couldn't bring a lot more of them. But I just want you to know that they're there. This one has been mentioned to me by several people recently. This document's about a year and a half old, I think, and it's a really great rundown of FSA loan things. There are other workshops here, I know today, and other advocates and representatives from USDA and our state agencies that will help you dig into all these issues. I'm not an expert myself in FSA loans. I can't tell you which of these is going to be right for your farm, but I want you to know that this resource is out here. I know it's illustrated. one of the problems I know as their former communications person is finding enough really great pictures of a diverse set of farmers to represent what's going on. So they said, hey, let's hire an illustrator. But trust me, this is nicely done. It's not for kids. It goes into a lot of depth on a really accessible level about how FSA is structured, what kind of loans are better for you, and how to really navigate that process. All of these resources, these next run that I'm going to show you, are all accessible on youngfarmers.org. Or you can Google Young Farmers, you can Google National Young Farmers Coalition. Any of those things will get you there. Yeah, okay. But sorry, that was a question. That was 5 minutes, not a question. Next slide. This was actually written by an Oklahoman a few years ago. This one was written in 2014, and she's here. Somebody introduced me to her. Emily Oakley wrote this on contract for them. I've never met her. Some of you might know her. But we know all the same people and have never met. But she put together this guide. It's a really nice, accessible guide to organic certification. Next slide. This is one of the interactive tools I referenced. So if you're looking at buying a piece of property, this will help you calculate that. If you go to the next slide, what I'm mentioning here is like, if you have a piece of land that's, let's say, something that you're wanting to purchase is $75,000, you can put that amount in here, and this calculator tool, based on the Young Farmers website, will help you see how you might stack together different loan and financing options to your advantage, including maybe the down payment that you have, different ways that you can pull that in, and try and calculate which of these options might ultimately be best for you. Because financing something is really complicated, and they try to simplify that. And also in this resource gives case studies about how different farms work with a combination of land trust and traditional bank loans, etc., to get where they needed to be. Another guide related to accessing farmland available on the website. Those are just a snapshot of some of the Young Farmer resources. I really encourage you to check them out, but I didn't want to neglect some of the national things. This is a less excitingly illustrated, actually let me go back. But you know, this would have been a lot cheaper for me to print, so kudos to them on that. Beginning Farmers in Oklahoma, this is fairly recent, this was 2015. This is a document available online also. I wish I could at least, like, give you guys the links. This is an Oklahoma State.
Fact sheet.
Yeah, fact sheet, yeah. But it's got a lot of helpful things in it. Likewise with the next fact sheet is available about a state-based loan program. Just wanting you to know these things are out there. And of course the national USDA a couple years ago implemented and revamped what they call beginning farmer section of their website. And if you haven't checked it out, it also has nice things that are specific to young farmers and new growers. And this is just part of the landing page. But they have a series of tools and things that they try to break down to help you navigate some of these programs in the same way that NYFC's resources do. And just as a side note, that illustrated document I showed you, they were partly contracted by USDA to build that. USDA realizes that they've had a problem reaching young growers about their programs. They have a gap. And so anytime they have a gap, and this is the same with SNAP benefits, they know there are people out there, for example, that aren't being reached by what they're doing, thus making it wasted taxpayer money. So they sometimes contract with nonprofits to try and promote their programs better. So that's what they've done a little bit of within NYFC. So you'll see some of the duplicate basic information presented in different ways on their own website and in NYFC's information. Next slide. This is just a highlight. This is a lot to read, I know, but I mentioned that the national organization had had a lot of success advocating in the recent Farm Bill. This is a snapshot of some of those things. I think we hear a lot of bad news all the time, but it's nice to be reminded that some things are positively being nudged forward. Different funding for different programs that have been really successful, protection for programs that we've heard from young growers across the years have been really beneficial. Like I said, any one of these could probably be a workshop in itself, but these are all represent resources available to young growers that have been improved upon or sustained instead of being cut, so that's nice. And that's it. I think that we're leaving a few minutes for questions at the end too, but unless somebody has something burning right now.
Chlebanowski, as I was introduced earlier. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology for the new and older farmers. I'm in that group that Chelsey described. I'm considered a young farmer. I will take it. Anytime somebody wants to tell me I'm young, I'm not going to argue too much. My body will argue on some days in the field, but I'm not going to argue. So real quickly, I'll just mention on this slide, if you guys follow me on social media, I like social media. I'm one of the few people that do. I have a lot of pictures of my baby seedlings. I was a photographer in a past life. This picture, though, I included for a specific reason because these are some coastal star romaine seedlings that look amazing, and they looked amazing for about 3 days after that. But somehow the greenhouse window didn't get open to vent, and they fried. And so this is an example of how a really inexpensive piece of technology could have helped me save all of the income that those would have generated at market. So we'll jump in, go to the next slide. This is our logo for the Looney Farm. We are down in Alec. It's one of those towns in Oklahoma. We've been down there, like he said, about 4 years this month. I was a suburbanite in Edmond and had this much ag experience. So YouTube has been my friend in lots and lots of ways. Move to the next one. So this is a picture. It's not a great one. It's kind of hard to see. This is our plot that we had grown on last year. As you mentioned, is our first year at market. This plot is actually 100 feet by 50 feet long. You can't really see it well, but there's actually 3 caterpillar tunnels on it. Basically, we do 30-inch wide beds, like a 50 feet long. We do the bio-intensive successive low-till method of planting and growing. We're actually in the process, though, of expanding. So those caterpillar tunnels are 100 feet long. And if you look at the top right, underneath them, you can see tarps. I have the back half of each of the tunnels under tarps to get those ground prepped. So we can expand those for this current season to 100 feet. We're also adding a second plot that's 80 feet by 100 feet using the same bed system. And we've been working on that as weather permits, and have had a lot of fun this week because I've discovered that the previous owners thought it was a really good place to bury a washing machine and I think a truck bed, honestly. So luckily my plow is okay. That's the big thing. It's not damaged. So this is just a picture from our market table this past summer. We were at the Moore Farmers Market all season. I know I'm here to talk about technology, but I'm going to take a real quick second to mention that as farmers, we are in the market to sell our goods. And if we are going to do that, we have to learn a little about marketing and about consumer behaviors and what they like, and we have to implement that into our market booths. Can we go to the next slide? And this is our current stall at the OSU OK Seed Market. We started this market in end of November. We were shocked getting in there. We were thrilled to get in that market. Right now we've got a lot of lettuce, and a lot of lettuce. Because that's what I had in November. We didn't know we were going to be in a market. And so I've got a lot of things ready for spring, and I'm excited to have some more of that color again. So let's talk about technology and what it is. First of all, to define it, Webster's Dictionary says simply, it's a manner of accomplishing a task. So in all technicality, my garden spade is technology. I can make beds with a garden spade. It's not fun, especially when you're doing 100 feet long beds. My BCS tractor with my plow, my rotary plow, gets it done a lot faster. I can do 25 beds in a day versus the 2 weeks it took me to do it by hand because I need a couple days to recuperate after doing a couple beds. So I'm going to go into this a little bit later, but I want to give you an idea about how broad it can be and to think about it broadly. I'm going to be narrowing it down, though, on some specific technologies that I've used in 4 areas for our farm business, being education, planning, growing, and social media and sales. I'll stop again and say real briefly that this is a business for me that happens to be a farm. And I think we have to remember that as growers. Because if we're not selling it, we're just the backyard gardener. And that's an expensive backyard garden that I have right here if I'm not selling it. So, okay, so education. My quote that I love, successful people